My husband called. Mom died last night. I inherited everything. You get nothing. Then I smiled, because what he didn't know was that his mother and I had made a deal 6 months ago that would change everything. I'm Imani Richardson, and this is the story of how I turned my husband's cruelty into the sweetest vindication of my life. Before we get into what happened, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or dismissed, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, don't wait until the end because you'll forget. And while you're at it, smash that like button so hard your phone feels it. Then drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Atlanta, Brooklyn, London, Amsterdam, Lagos. I want to know where my people are. Your engagement helps stories like mine reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's get back to the moment my world turned upside down. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in our kitchen in Buckhead, steam rising from my coffee mug, watching the sunrise paint the Atlanta skyline in shades of amber and rose. Our penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were floating above the city. 17 years of marriage had given us this view, this life, this carefully constructed illusion of success. My phone buzzed against the marble countertop. Darnell's name flashed across the screen. I picked up. "Hey, you're up early." "She's gone." His voice was flat, emotionless, the way he'd learned to speak to me over the years. "Mom died last night. Heart attack, quick." My hand froze halfway to my mouth. "Oh my God, Darnell. I'm so sorry. Where are you? Are you at the hospital? I can come." "Don't bother." The coldness in those 2 words made my chest tighten. I set down my coffee, pressing the phone harder against my ear. "What do you mean, don't bother? Your mother just died. You need support." "What I need," he interrupted, his voice gaining an edge I'd heard too many times before, "is for you to understand something clearly. Mom left everything to me. The estate, the investment portfolio, the properties, the trust fund, all of it. Every single asset goes to me." He paused, and I could hear the satisfaction seeping through the phone line. "You get nothing, Imani. Absolutely nothing." I stood there in my silk robe, barefoot on the heated floors of our luxury apartment, and felt something shift inside me. Not the grief I should have felt for Lorraine Richardson, the woman who had raised the man I married. Not the shock of learning about her death. No, what I felt was the final click of a lock falling into place. "Are you there?" Darnell's voice carried a hint of smugness now. "I know this might be difficult for you to process." "I'm here," I said quietly. And then, before I could stop myself, a smile spread across my face. Small at first, then wider, until I was grinning at my reflection in the window. "Did you just laugh?" His voice sharpened with irritation. "My mother just died. And you're laughing?" "I'm smiling," I corrected, my voice steady. "There's a difference." "You're unbelievable. You know what? I'm not even surprised. This is exactly why Mom made sure you wouldn't see a penny." "She knew what you really were." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, dark roast. "Is that what you think?" "It's what I know. Look, I'll be back tomorrow to discuss next steps. We need to talk about the divorce anyway. Might as well handle everything at once." He paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Oh, and Imani? You might want to start looking for a new place to live. This penthouse? It's in Mom's estate, which means it's mine now." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, watching the city wake up below me. Cars crawled along Peachtree Street like ants. Early morning joggers traced paths through Piedmont Park. Life continued, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my world. Then I set down my phone, picked up my coffee, and walked to my home office. I had calls to make. Let me take you back 6 months to help you understand how we got here. Darnell and I met in college, Spelman and Morehouse, the classic story. He was pre-law, sharp-dressed, with ambitions that matched his mother's expectations. I was studying business administration, the first in my family to attend university. My parents had emigrated from Trinidad when I was 5, working 3 jobs between them to give me opportunities they never had. Lorraine Richardson was old money. Her family had built their wealth through real estate development across the South, starting in the 1960s, when Black entrepreneurship was an act of defiance. By the time Darnell and I married, the Richardson family name opened doors that most people didn't even know existed. Our wedding was featured in Ebony magazine. 200 guests at the historic Swan House, reception catered by the city's most exclusive culinary team, a honeymoon in Santorini that cost more than my parents' annual income. For the first 5 years, I thought I was living a fairy tale. Darnell joined his mother's real estate development firm, Richardson Properties Group. I worked in marketing at a boutique agency, building brands for emerging luxury companies. We were the power couple everyone envied. Young, successful, beautiful, Black excellence personified. But fairy tales have a way of revealing themselves as fiction. The cracks started small. Darnell would forget to mention business dinners until the last minute. He'd take calls in another room, lowering his voice when I entered. Weekend trips for property assessments that he insisted I didn't need to attend. I wasn't naive. I knew what those signs meant. What I didn't expect was how much his mother would encourage it. The first time I confronted Darnell about his infidelity was on our 8th anniversary. I'd found hotel receipts, credit card charges for jewelry I'd never received, text messages that made my stomach turn. When I showed him the evidence, he didn't even try to lie. "What did you expect?" he'd said, loosening his tie as he stood in our bedroom. "You think I'm supposed to be satisfied with this?" He gestured vaguely at me, as if I were a disappointing purchase he couldn't return. "With your wife?" I'd asked, my voice breaking. "Yes, actually. That's generally how marriage works." He'd laughed. Actually laughed. "Imani, you're a good woman, you really are. But let's be honest about what this marriage is. You got the name, the lifestyle, the social status. I got." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Companionship. We both got what we needed." "I needed a faithful husband." "Then you married the wrong man." He'd walked past me to pour himself whiskey from the crystal decanter his mother had given us. "Look, I'm not asking for a divorce. I'm not trying to hurt you. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not just because you have some fantasy about what marriage should be." I'd stood there, designer dress still on from our anniversary dinner reservation he'd canceled, and realized I was looking at a stranger. But the real betrayal came when I went to Lorraine seeking advice. I'd driven to her estate in Annesley Park, the crown jewel of the Richardson properties. The house was a restored Victorian mansion, all soaring ceilings and original hardwood, surrounded by manicured gardens that required a full-time staff to maintain. Old wealth whispered from every corner. Lorraine had received me in her sitting room, afternoon tea already prepared on the antique serving cart. "I know why you're here," she'd said before I could speak. She was 72 then, elegant in a way that made everyone else look unfinished. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, pearls at her throat, posture so straight it looked architectural. "Then you know what he's been doing," I'd replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course I know. I've always known." She'd poured tea into delicate china cups, the sound of liquid hitting porcelain unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Darnell is like his father in that regard. Men of a certain caliber have certain needs." I'd stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. "You're condoning this?" "I'm being realistic." She'd handed me a cup, her diamond rings catching the afternoon light. "You need to understand something about this family, Imani. We build legacies. We don't break them over something as trivial as infidelity." "Trivial?" "Yes, trivial." Her voice had sharpened. "You think you're the first woman in this family to deal with a straying husband? My mother-in-law gave me the same advice I'm giving you. Secure your position, maintain your dignity, and don't rock the boat." I'd set down the teacup, my hands shaking too much to hold it steady. "I can't do this. I won't." Lorraine had sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. Then you'll have nothing. Do you understand that? If you divorce Darnell, you'll walk away with whatever pittance the prenuptial agreement allows. No property, no business interests, no social standing. You'll be just another ex-wife, forgotten before the ink dries on the dissolution papers. I'd rather be poor and respected than rich and humiliated. She'd laughed then, a cold sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Spoken like someone who's never actually been poor. Respect doesn't pay for penthouses, Imani. Pride doesn't maintain the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to. I'd left that day feeling hollow, understanding that I'd never truly been part of this family. I was an accessory, a living decoration in Darnell's life, tolerated but never truly accepted. That was 18 months ago. What Lorraine didn't know, what Darnell certainly didn't know, was that her words had planted a seed. If this family was about building legacies and securing positions, then I would learn to play their game, but I'd play it better than any of them had taught me. 3 months after that conversation, I received an unexpected phone call. Mrs. Richardson, this is Gerald Hampton from Hampton & Associates Legal Services. I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Lorraine Richardson. She'd like to schedule a private meeting with you. Just you, not Mr. Richardson. I'd been so surprised I'd nearly dropped my phone. A private meeting? About what? She didn't specify, ma'am, but she was quite insistent that it be conducted confidentially. Would you be available next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I'd agreed, curiosity overriding caution. The meeting had taken place not at Lorraine's estate, but at her attorney's office downtown, a subtle indication that whatever this was, it was serious. Lorraine had been waiting in a conference room, Gerald Hampton beside her with stacks of legal documents spread across the mahogany table. Thank you for coming, Lorraine had said. She looked different than I'd ever seen her, smaller somehow, more fragile. There were new lines around her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that she tried to hide. Your call surprised me, I'd admitted, taking the seat across from her. I imagine it did. She'd folded her hands carefully, and I noticed how prominent the veins had become, how thin her skin looked. I'm going to be direct with you, Imani, because I don't have the luxury of time anymore. I'm dying. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. What? I'd whispered. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 3 months ago. She'd said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing quarterly earnings reports. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. I'm not interested in aggressive treatment at my age. I've had a good life, a long life. I'd sat back in my chair, trying to process this information. Whatever I'd expected from this meeting, it hadn't been this. Does Darnell know? No, and he won't know until I decide he should. Her eyes had met mine, sharp despite her illness. Which brings me to why you're here. I need to discuss my estate planning with you. Gerald had shifted in his seat, sliding a document across the table toward me. Mrs. Richardson has asked me to prepare a revised trust structure. She'd like to explain the details to you personally. Lorraine had leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I made a mistake with you, Imani. That day you came to me about Darnell's affairs. I gave you the same poisonous advice that was given to me 50 years ago. I told you to accept disrespect for the sake of financial security. I remember. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost her something. I've spent the past 3 months reflecting on my life, on the legacy I'm leaving behind. And you know what I realized? I raised a man who treats his wife the way my husband treated me. I enabled the same cycle of emotional abuse and infidelity that destroyed my own happiness. I looked the other way when I should have demanded better. I'd felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I'd blinked them back. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm going to give you something I never had. Leverage. She'd tapped the document in front of me. This is a new estate structure. If you agree to certain conditions, I'm prepared to ensure that you, not Darnell, control the majority of my assets after my death. My heart had started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What? Gerald had cleared his throat. What Mrs. Richardson is proposing is a complex trust arrangement. Legally, the assets would initially transfer to Mr. Richardson upon her death, as per the existing estate plan. However, those assets would be held in a revocable trust, with very specific conditions attached. Conditions that Darnell would violate within hours of my death. Lorraine had added with a grim smile. I know my son. The moment he thinks he's inherited everything, he'll make certain mistakes. Predictable mistakes. I'd looked between them, my mind racing. What kind of mistakes? Lorraine had pulled out another document. This one was a private investigator's report, I'd realized with shock. Photos, bank statements, hotel records, text message screenshots. Darnell has been conducting an affair with his paralegal, Valencia Brooks, for 2 years. He's purchased an investment property in her name. He's promised to divorce you and marry her once I'm gone, and he's secured his inheritance. The photos had shown Darnell and a stunning woman with copper-toned skin and honey-blonde locks, photographed at expensive restaurants, emerging from luxury hotels, shopping on Rodeo Drive during a supposed business trip to Los Angeles. He's been planning this, I'd said, my voice hollow. For quite some time, Lorraine had confirmed. Here's what else he's been doing. She'd spread out financial documents. He's been slowly liquidating joint assets, moving money into offshore accounts I'm not supposed to know about. He's been consulting with a different attorney, not our family lawyer, about divorce proceedings. He's been laying groundwork to leave you with as little as possible. I'd felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting perfectly still. How long have you known? 6 months. I hired a private investigator when I noticed irregularities in the company books. I thought Darnell might be embezzling. She'd laughed bitterly. Turns out he was just stealing from his own marriage to fund his mistress's lifestyle. Gerald had interjected, his tone professional and measured. Mrs. Richardson's proposal is this. She'll create a trust with specific morality clauses. If Mr. Richardson engages in infidelity, financial misconduct, or attempts to divorce you within 2 years of inheriting, the trust automatically transfers primary control to you. He'd receive only a modest annual stipend, enough to live comfortably, but nowhere near the full estate value. How modest? I'd asked. $200,000 annually, Lorraine had said. Comfortable for most people. Devastating for someone who's been living on millions. I'd stared at the documents, my mind spinning. Why would you do this? I thought you wanted me to just accept his behavior. Lorraine's expression had softened in a way I'd never seen before. I told you, I made a mistake. I've been lying in bed at night, unable to sleep, thinking about what I'm leaving behind. A son who thinks love is transactional, a family business built on beauty but rotting with dishonesty, a legacy of women who were taught to endure rather than demand better. She'd reached across the table, her thin hand covering mine. I can't fix my own marriage. I can't undo the years I wasted pretending everything was fine. But maybe I can give you what I never had, the power to choose. Choose what? Whether to stay or go, whether to forgive or walk away, whether to build something new or burn it all down. Her grip had tightened. But whatever you choose, you'll do it from a position of strength, not desperation. I'd looked down at her hand on mine, spotted with age, decorated with the same rings she'd worn for decades, trembling slightly with the effort of reaching out. What do you want in return? Honesty, she'd said simply. I want you to promise me that you won't tell Darnell any of this until after I'm gone. Let him think everything is proceeding according to his plan. Let him believe he's won. And then, when the time comes, I want you to make whatever choice is right for you, not what's financially convenient, not what's socially acceptable, but what genuinely makes you happy. And if I choose to forgive him, to try to make the marriage work, then the trust provisions can be amended, and you'll both share the estate equally, but he'll have to earn that forgiveness through demonstrated change, not empty promises. She'd pulled her hand back, settling into her chair. I'm not trying to destroy my son, Imani. I'm trying to save him from becoming a man I don't recognize anymore. Gerald had pushed a pen toward me. This requires your signature on several confidentiality agreements. You cannot disclose any of this to Mr. Richardson or anyone else until after Mrs. Richardson's passing and the trust provisions are triggered. I'd picked up the pen, feeling its weight in my hand. This was a weapon disguised as a writing instrument. This was leverage. This was freedom. There's one more thing, Lorraine had added. The trust also includes the penthouse you're currently living in, Richardson Properties Group, the commercial holdings in Miami, the vacation property in Martha's Vineyard, and the investment portfolio. Total value is approximately $87 million. I'd nearly dropped the pen. $87 million? Give or take, depending on market conditions. She'd smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it looked genuine. Darnell thinks I'm worth maybe $30 million. He has no idea about the offshore accounts, the silent partnerships, the real estate held under corporate entities. I've been very careful about what I let him see. Why? Because I learned early in my marriage that the only real security a woman has is what she can hide. She gestured to the documents. So, Imani Richardson, née Baptiste, daughter of Trinidadian immigrants, first-generation college graduate, woman who married into wealth but never forgot where she came from. Will you accept my offer? I'd thought about my parents, working themselves to exhaustion so I could have better opportunities. I'd thought about the young woman I'd been at Spelman, full of dreams and ambition. I'd thought about the wife I'd become, slowly shrinking herself to fit into someone else's vision of what she should be. Then I'd thought about the woman I could become. I'd signed every document Gerald placed in front of me. That was 6 months ago. For half a year, I'd lived with this secret, watching Darnell move through our life with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. I'd smiled through business dinners where Valencia was conspicuously absent. I'd nodded sympathetically when he complained about stress at work, knowing he was actually stressed about coordinating his double life. I'd even helped him plan his mother's upcoming birthday celebration, which she'd insisted on despite her declining health. Lorraine and I had developed an unexpected relationship during those months. We'd meet for lunch at quiet restaurants in Midtown, where she'd tell me stories about building the family business, about the deals that succeeded and the ones that failed, about the art of negotiation and the science of leverage. Power, she'd told me over grilled salmon at South City Kitchen, isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the one who knows things others don't. She'd taught me about the real estate portfolio, which properties were appreciating, which were money pits held for sentimental reasons. She'd introduced me to her private banker, her investment advisor, her estate attorney. She'd given me access to financial records Darnell had never seen. When this happens, she'd said during one of our last meetings, her skin gray with illness, her hands shaking as she lifted her water glass, he's going to be angry. Angrier than you've ever seen him. He'll say terrible things. He'll threaten you. He might even try to contest the trust. Can he? Gerald assures me the trust is airtight, but Darnell will try. That's who he is. Someone who fights dirty when he doesn't get his way. She'd set down the glass carefully. You need to be prepared for that, for the man behind the mask. I've already seen him, I'd said quietly. I know who he really is. Do you? Her eyes had searched mine. It's one thing to know intellectually. It's another thing to stand firm when he's using everything. Guilt, anger, manipulation, threats, to break you down. I won't break. Good. She'd smiled, though it looked exhausted. Because that's the other thing I want to give you, Imani. Not just money, not just security, but the strength to stand alone if you need to. 2 weeks ago, Lorraine had been hospitalized. The cancer had spread faster than expected, the doctors said. She had days, maybe a week. I'd visited her in the ICU, where machines beeped steadily and the smell of antiseptic was overwhelming. Darnell had been there, playing the devoted son, his face a mask of appropriate concern. Valencia had texted him during the visit. I'd seen his phone screen light up, seen the hearts emoji, seen him quickly silence it and slip the phone back in his pocket. When Darnell left to take a call, Lorraine had gestured for me to come closer. Remember what I taught you, she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the machines. Power is knowing things others don't. I remember. He's going to call you soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. And when he does, he's going to say things designed to hurt you, to make you feel small. Her fingers had found mine, barely any strength left in her grip. Don't let him. You're not the woman he thinks you are anymore. I know. Promise me something. Anything. Don't waste your power on revenge. Use it to build something better. She'd closed her eyes, and I'd thought she'd fallen asleep, but then she'd added, and when you finally tell him, watch his face carefully. That moment, when he realizes he destroyed his own life, that's the only revenge worth having. She'd died that night, quietly, with Darnell asleep in the chair beside her bed, and me already at home, preparing for the phone call I knew would come. Now, standing in our penthouse kitchen with my coffee going cold and Darnell's cruel words still echoing in my ears, I picked up my phone and made the first call. Gerald, it's Imani. He just called me. Everything is proceeding exactly as Lorraine predicted. Excellent. Gerald's voice was crisp and professional. The trust provisions activate automatically upon any attempt to divorce or cohabit with another party. Has he mentioned Ms. Brooks? Not yet, but he will. I moved to the window, watching the city sparkle below. When should I tell him? I'd recommend waiting until he's taken concrete steps toward the divorce. Let him file the paperwork, move money around, whatever he's planning. The more evidence we have of his intentions, the stronger your position becomes. And the business? Once the trust transfers to your control, you'll be majority owner of Richardson Properties Group. Mr. Richardson will have the option to remain as an employee, at your discretion, or accept a buyout package. I smiled at my reflection in the glass. At my discretion. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Richardson was very specific about that. After I hung up, I made my second call. Daddy, it's me. I need to tell you something about what's been happening. My father listened quietly as I explained everything. Darnell's infidelity, Lorraine's illness, the trust arrangement, the inheritance that wasn't what my husband thought it was. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my father, who had worked double shifts as a hospital custodian for 20 years so I could go to college, who had taught me that dignity was worth more than dollars, said simply, Your mother and I raised you to be strong, not to be stepped on. Do what you need to do, baby girl. We're proud of you no matter what. That was when I finally let myself cry. Darnell came home the next afternoon. I'd spent the morning preparing, not in the way he'd expect, not with tears and pleas for reconciliation, but with phone calls to attorneys, accountants, and business advisors. I'd reviewed every document Gerald had sent me. I'd transferred copies of critical files to secure cloud storage. I'd even called a locksmith, though I hadn't needed his services yet. The key to power, Lorraine had taught me, was preparation. I heard his footsteps in the hallway before I saw him. Confident, measured, the walk of a man who believed he controlled the situation. When he entered the living room, he was already loosening his tie, barely glancing in my direction. We need to talk, he said, dropping his briefcase on the leather sofa. I agree. I was sitting in the armchair by the window, afternoon light streaming in behind me. I'd dressed carefully, a cream silk blouse, tailored navy slacks, minimal jewelry, professional, composed, strong. He seemed surprised by my tone. He'd probably expected me to be distraught, begging, desperate. Instead, I sat with my hands folded calmly in my lap, watching him with the same analytical gaze I'd use in a business negotiation. Good, he said, recovering. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Makes everything easier. He poured himself scotch from the bar cart, the expensive single malt his mother had given him for his 40th birthday. I've already spoken with my attorney. We'll file for divorce next week. Given the prenuptial agreement, the process should be relatively straightforward. Should it? He took a long sip, settling into the sofa. The prenup is clear, Imani. You get a settlement, generous, I might add, but nothing from the family assets. No property, no business interests, no claim to my inheritance. Your inheritance, I repeated softly. Yes. Mom made it very clear over the years where she stood on protecting family wealth. He crossed one leg over the other, perfectly relaxed. I know this isn't easy for you. 17 years is a long time, but we both knew this marriage had run its course. Did we? Come on, he gestured with his glass. We've barely been intimate in 2 years. We live separate lives under the same roof. You have your charity work, I have my business. We're roommates at this point, not spouses. And Valencia Brooks? I asked, my voice steady. Where does she fit into this narrative you're constructing? His hand paused halfway to his mouth. What? Your paralegal. The woman you've been seeing for 2 years. The woman you bought a luxury condo for in Buckhead Village. The woman you promised to marry once your mother died, and you secured your inheritance. I tilted my head slightly. That Valencia Brooks. I'm curious where she factors into this story about us drifting apart. The color drained from his face, then rushed back in an angry flush. You've been spying on me? I've been paying attention. There's a difference. He set down the glass hard enough that liquid sloshed over the rim. So what? You want to play the wounded wife now? Drag this out with accusations and drama? No drama, I said calmly. Just facts. You've been conducting an extramarital affair. You've been moving marital assets into accounts I'm not supposed to know about. You've been planning to divorce me for months while pretending everything was fine. I stood, smoothing my slacks. Those are facts, Darnell, not accusations. Listen to me very carefully. He stood too, moving toward me, with the kind of aggressive posture meant to intimidate. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you can prove, it doesn't matter. Mom's estate is worth $30 million, and every penny is coming to me. You signed a prenup that gives you exactly $500,000 and no claims to future inheritances. That's what you're walking away with. $30 million, I said thoughtfully. Is that what you think she was worth? That's what her disclosed assets show. Yes. Interesting. I moved past him to the window, looking out at the skyline. Tell me something, Darnell. In all your years working at Richardson Properties Group, did you ever wonder why your mother never let you see the full financial picture? He frowned. What are you talking about? The offshore accounts, the silent partnerships, the real estate holdings under shell corporations, the investment portfolio she managed personally. I turned to face him. Did you really think a woman who built a multi-generational real estate empire would show her own son everything she owned? His jaw tightened. You're making things up now. Am I? I pulled out my phone, opened an email, and held it up so he could see the screen. This is from Gerald Hampton, your mother's estate attorney. It's a summary of the trust provisions that took effect upon her death. Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to hear this from him directly? For the first time since he'd walked in, I saw genuine uncertainty cross his face. What trust provisions? The ones your mother established 6 months ago. I set down my phone. The ones that placed the majority of her estate, approximately $87 million, not 30, into a conditional trust. 87? He stopped, shaking his head. That's impossible. It's very possible. Your mother was far wealthier than she ever let you know, and far smarter than you gave her credit for. I walked to my bag, pulled out a folder, and handed it to him. These are copies of the trust documents. You should read them carefully. He snatched the folder from my hand, flipping through pages with growing agitation. I watched his face as comprehension dawned, first confusion, then disbelief, then slowly, terribly, the understanding of what he was reading. This says, his voice was hoarse, this says the trust transfers to you if I engage in infidelity or attempt to divorce you within 2 years of her death. That's correct. But we're already... He looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. genuine fear. We're already getting divorced. Are we? I asked innocently, because I don't recall agreeing to anything. You can't do this. He threw the folder onto the coffee table, papers scattering. This is manipulation, coercion. No court will uphold this. Actually, Gerald assures me it's entirely legal. Your mother had the right to structure her estate however she chose. And she chose to include morality clauses tied to your behavior during the first 2 years after her death. Morality clauses. He laughed, but it sounded strangled. My mother is dead, and she's still trying to control my life from the grave. No, I said quietly. She's trying to teach you something she failed to teach you while she was alive. That actions have consequences. That you can't treat people as disposable and expect no repercussions. He moved toward me again, and this time there was no mistaking the aggression in his posture. Listen to me, Imani. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it's not a game. My voice cut through his like steel. Your mother came to me 6 months ago. She told me about her cancer. She told me about your affair with Valencia. She told me about your plans to divorce me and leave me with nothing. And then she offered me a choice. What choice? To stay or go. To forgive or walk away. But whatever I chose, I'd do it from a position of power, not desperation. I met his eyes steadily. She gave me what she never had, Darnell. Leverage. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. You plotted this with my dying mother. I accepted her offer to restructure her estate in a way that protected both of us from your worst impulses. I picked up the scattered papers, organizing them calmly. If you'd been faithful, if you'd treated our marriage with respect, none of this would matter. The trust would dissolve after 2 years, and we'd share everything equally. But you couldn't do that, could you? You manipulative. Careful, I warned, because right now, you're standing in a penthouse that belongs to the trust I control. You're wearing a watch that was purchased with funds from accounts I now manage. You're threatening a woman who has the power to reduce you to a $200,000 annual stipend while she controls an $87 million empire. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched him process this, watched the calculations running behind his eyes. 17 years of marriage had taught me how to read his expressions. I saw the moment he considered violence. His hands clenched, his jaw tightened, and then the moment he dismissed it as too risky. I saw him consider legal action, then remember what the document said about airtight provisions. I saw him cycle through anger, denial, bargaining, all in the space of 30 seconds. Finally, his shoulders slumped. What do you want? His voice was barely above a whisper. That's the wrong question. I sat back down in my chair, crossing my legs. The right question is, what do you want? Because here's what's going to happen. You have exactly 2 options. I'm listening. Option 1. You end your relationship with Valencia immediately. You commit genuinely, not performatively, to rebuilding this marriage. You attend couples therapy. You become transparent about all finances. You earn back trust you've destroyed. If you can do that, if you can prove over the next 2 years that you're capable of being the partner you should have been all along, then when the trust provisions expire, we'll share the estate equally. You'll be a wealthy man married to a wealthy woman, and maybe we'll have built something real. He said nothing, just stared at the floor. Option 2, I continued. We divorce right now, today if you want. I won't contest it. But the moment those papers are filed, the trust transfers entirely to me. You'll receive your annual stipend, comfortable, but nowhere near what you've been accustomed to. You'll no longer work at Richardson Properties Group, though I'll provide a generous severance package. And you'll be free to marry Valencia and explain to her why the wealthy heir she thought she was getting is actually just another divorced man living on a fixed income. $200,000, he said bitterly. It's more than most people make in a year. It's more than my parents made combined at the peak of their careers. I leaned forward. But it's not $87 million, is it? You're enjoying this. The accusation dripped with venom. I'm not enjoying anything about this situation, Darnell. I'm simply refusing to be the victim you and your mother assumed I'd be. I stood, smoothing my blouse. Your mother's funeral is Saturday. I expect you'll want to maintain appearances for family and business associates, so I suggest you take the next 72 hours to think very carefully about which option you're choosing. And if I don't choose either? Then you're choosing option 2 by default, because I'm done living in limbo while you decide whether I'm worth treating with basic respect. I picked up my bag. I'll be staying at the Four Seasons tonight. You can reach me on my cell if you need anything. You're leaving? Now? I'm giving you space to think, and I'm giving myself space to not watch you process this. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Darnell? If you're considering trying to hide assets or move money around, don't. Gerald has been monitoring everything since your mother died. Any attempt at financial manipulation will be documented and used to strengthen my case if you choose option 2. You've thought of everything. Your mother taught me well. I opened the door. She said something to me before she died. She said the only revenge worth having is watching someone realize they destroyed their own life. I didn't understand what she meant then, but I think I do now. I left him standing there in the living room, surrounded by the scattered papers of his mother's final lesson, and I didn't look back. 3 days later, I stood in the front row at Lorraine Richardson's funeral. The service was held at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same church where Dr. King had preached, the same church where generations of Black Atlanta's elite had celebrated and mourned. The sanctuary was packed with business leaders, politicians, society figures, everyone who'd ever benefited from knowing Lorraine Richardson. Darnell sat beside me, his face an appropriate mask of grief. Valencia was nowhere to be seen. Gerald had informed me that Darnell had ended their relationship the morning after our conversation, though whether from genuine remorse or calculated self-interest remained unclear. We'd barely spoken since that night. He'd sent one text. I'm choosing option 1. We'll talk after the funeral. Now, as the choir sang His Eye is on the Sparrow, I felt his hand slip into mine. The gesture was tentative, uncertain, so different from the confident possession I'd grown accustomed to. I let him hold my hand, but I didn't squeeze back. Not yet. The pastor spoke about Lorraine's legacy, her business acumen, her philanthropy, her role as a matriarch. He mentioned her late husband, her son, her daughter-in-law, painting a picture of a family united in grief and love. If only they knew the truth. After the service, during the reception at the estate, Darnell's cousin Monica pulled me aside. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice gentle. I know you and Lorraine grew close toward the end. We did, I said honestly. She taught me a lot. She always said you were too good for this family. Monica smiled sadly. I think she saw something in you that reminded her of herself, before life and marriage and expectations wore her down. Maybe, I said. Or maybe she just wanted to make sure history didn't repeat itself. Monica looked at me curiously, but before she could ask what I meant, Darnell appeared at my elbow. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Privately? We walked to Lorraine's study, the same room where she'd first told me about restructuring her estate. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the shelves of books, the antique desk, the portrait of her late husband above the fireplace. Darnell closed the door behind us. I've been thinking, he began, about everything you said, about everything Mom set up, about what I've done to our marriage. I waited, saying nothing. I was wrong. The words seemed to cost him something. About Valencia, about how I treated you, about assuming I could just do whatever I wanted without consequences. I was entitled and arrogant, and I took you for granted. Yes, I agreed. You were. You did. He flinched at my directness. I want to choose option 1. I want to try to fix this. Not because of the money. he added quickly, but because I'm realizing what I've lost, who I've hurt. Not because of the money, I repeated skeptically. Okay, not just because of the money. He ran a hand over his face. Look, I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm suddenly a changed man. That would be insulting to both of us. But I'm willing to do the work, the therapy, the transparency, whatever it takes. Why? Because my mother was right. I destroyed something good because I was too stupid and selfish to recognize its value until it was gone. He met my eyes. And because maybe, if you give me a chance, I can become someone worthy of a second one. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation I'd become so good at spotting, but all I saw was exhaustion, uncertainty, and something that might have been genuine remorse. Okay, I said finally. Okay? We'll try option 1. But understand something, Darnell. I'm not the woman you married. I'm not even the woman I was 6 months ago. Your mother made sure of that. She gave me power, yes. But more importantly, she gave me the knowledge that I don't need you to survive. That I don't need this family name or this lifestyle to have value. I understand. Do you? Because if we do this, if we try to rebuild, it won't be on your terms anymore. It'll be on equal footing, or it won't be at all. I moved to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens. And if at any point in the next 2 years I decide you're not genuinely changing, if I decide this marriage isn't worth saving, I'll choose option 2 without hesitation. No guilt, no second guessing, no looking back. Fair enough. We start therapy next week. We open every financial account to each other. We rebuild trust through actions, not words. I turned to face him. And Darnell, if you ever speak to me the way you did on the phone the morning your mother died, if you ever try to make me feel small or worthless or undeserving, we're done. Immediately. No discussion. Understood. We stood there in his mother's study, 2 people bound by marriage and money, and a dead woman's final gambit, trying to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. Finally, I extended my hand. Then let's see if we can build something better than what we had. He took my hand and we shook, not as husband and wife, not as romantic partners, but as 2 people entering into a new negotiation with uncertain terms. As we walked back to the reception, I caught sight of Lorraine's portrait hanging in the hallway. She was younger in the painting, maybe 50, dressed in her signature pearls, with that knowing smile that suggested she could see around corners others didn't know existed. I paused in front of it, and Darnell stopped beside me. She was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, I said softly. She always was. Darnell stared at his mother's painted face. I just never realized I was one of the pieces. We all were, I corrected. The difference is, she taught me the rules before she left the board. 6 months have passed since Lorraine's death. Darnell and I attend therapy every Tuesday. Some sessions are productive. Some end with one or both of us in tears. We're learning to communicate without weapons, to be honest without being cruel, to rebuild something that might not look like our old marriage, but could be something better. I've taken over as CEO of Richardson Properties Group. The board was skeptical at first, until I presented the expansion plan Lorraine and I had developed together before she died. We're breaking ground on an affordable housing development in Southwest Atlanta, a project that pairs social good with smart business. The investors are excited, the community is supportive, and I'm finally building something that feels like mine. Darnell works as Chief Operating Officer, reporting to me. The power dynamic shift was difficult for him at first, but he's adjusting. Some days are better than others. Valencia Brooks no longer works at the company. She received a generous severance package and a strong recommendation letter. Last I heard, she'd moved to Charlotte and was engaged to a mortgage broker she met on a dating app. I hope she's happy. I hope she found what she was looking for. My parents visit every month. My father still can't believe his little girl runs a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. My mother just smiles and says she always knew I had steel in my spine. I don't know if Darnell and I will make it to the 2-year mark as a reunited couple. Some days, I think we might. Other days, I'm already mentally planning my future as a single woman with the resources to do whatever I want, whenever I want. But that's the gift Lorraine gave me. The freedom to choose without desperation dictating my decisions. Last week, I found a letter in one of the estate boxes. It was addressed to me in Lorraine's elegant script, dated 2 days before she died. Dear Imani, if you're reading this, it means everything has gone according to plan. Darnell called you with his cruel news. You smiled, just as I taught you. And now you're learning what it means to hold power rather than beg for it. I don't know if you'll choose to rebuild your marriage or walk away. Both choices are valid. Both require courage. But whatever you choose it for yourself. Not for money, not for status, not for revenge. But because it genuinely serves the life you want to build. I wasted 50 years accepting disrespect in exchange for financial security. Don't make my mistake. Money is wonderful, but freedom is priceless. Thank you for giving an old woman hope that maybe, just maybe, the next generation will be wiser than mine was. With love and respect, Lorraine. I keep the letter in my desk drawer at the office. On difficult days, when the weight of decisions feels crushing, I pull it out and read it again. Then I remember, I'm Imani Richardson, daughter of immigrants, first-generation college graduate, CEO of an $87 million empire, and the woman who smiled when her husband tried to destroy her. And I get back to work building the life I deserve. So viewers, here's my question for you. If you were in my position, would you choose to rebuild the marriage or walk away wealthy and free? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated, dismissed, or counted out, hit that subscribe button. Because there's power in our stories, and I'm just getting started sharing mine.